Right now, though, it's time for us to talk a little bit about the Loop Trolley. It got tested this weekend, albeit being pulled around by a pickup truck, but what the heck? That's a start. Car 001 hit the streets early Sunday, and from all that I've been able to glean, it was quite successful. Leah Thorson joins us now from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Good morning, Leah. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
So, from everything I've heard, 001 had an uneventful trip, which is, I guess, exactly what they wanted when this all comes down to push and shove.
I guess so. To be truthful, I wasn't out there and didn't see it, but it was just meant to be an initial test with like you said, with the truck pushing it and pulling it, and it'll advance more as they hit their towards summer, which is when they want to get it running for passengers.
Yeah, and that's going to be an interesting experience, and it's sort of, I guess you'd say it's the little brother or sister to MetroLink, which is where we can shift our attention to right now. Tragic situation that occurred this past week where father and son got on board a train over in Illinois, and a number of young people got on board the train as well and started pestering them, asking them for money. And when they got into the St. Louis area, I guess the young man gave $5 to one of the kids, who then promptly pistol whipped him, the young man. And at the same time, while that was going on, the gun went off, the weapon was discharged, and a completely innocent bystander standing on the platform was shot and ultimately succumbed from the wound when he was shot. And this got a lot of people interested, and the Post did, I think, a bang-up job on trying to figure out exactly crime, assaults, and so on and so forth. It's really hard to get the numbers on what's going on MetroLink, isn't it?
It's virtually impossible, which is what we found out. We've been trying to get these numbers from MetroLink to get a better sense of what crime is since the fall, and we're rejected. I mean, they don't fall under Missouri Sunshine Law. So when we got rejected in our records request there, we did file federal requests, and we were also shot down there. And court decisions have actually backed them up, which is even more astounding. So we went in and we asked the city and the county for their crime statistics, and we did ask St. Clair County, but we put in that request a little bit later and didn't have it in time for the story. But even though it's such a patchwork of municipalities, so many stations are located in many places, I mean, both were very upfront, like, this is not a complete picture. So knowing what's real crime versus what's perception, I mean, we wanted to see which stations are having the most problems, and that information just isn't out there. And for transit riders, that's really a disservice to them. I mean, if you're talking about driving, you can, accident reports are public record, and transit riders don't have that same availability of information.
In some metropolitan areas that have rail service of some kind, they have their own security/police force. They have the power of arrest. They have the power to detain people. They have the power to throw people off the system. Here in St. Louis, in the St. Louis area, is it handled by one organization, or is it multiple municipalities and they each have their own rules and regulations when it comes to what goes on the trains?
It's multiple. So state law bars Metro from having its own police force, and that has been around since 1993 when the first section of MetroLink opened. And so now you have the city and county police, they have a MetroLink unit, but then sometimes if you have Wellston respond, then that's a whole other set of numbers. And there's also a whole other set of coding if it doesn't get entered as MetroLink for the purpose of keeping these stats. But you say they enter the station address, then you're not getting that either. Like on the spreadsheet that we got from St. Louis City Police, Walker Mockcop was going through it. We did the story together. He's a data reporter at the paper. It didn't even have listed the 2013 homicide on McLeod Landing. Mm-hmm. It wasn't there.
I guess the real question is, and maybe it was addressed somewhere in the article that I missed it, but why in 1993 did the state, in setting this whole process up, say they can't have their own private security force or a force that is basically given the power of arrest? Why? What was the thinking behind that? Do you know?
Well, we did try looking into that, and we never got a concrete answer. We kind of got a few things from people who said, I heard this, I heard this. But, going back that far, we were never able to ascertain exactly why it was so important to do this. One of the people I did talk to in the story is the Minneapolis data guy who works for their transit police, and talking to him was really interesting because that transit system also covers a really wide area too. I think it's 4 counties, a lot of municipalities, but they have one system, so they can keep all their records in one place, and they are considered public records.
It seems to me, too, that let's just ignore the fact that there are different municipalities that are involved in this, the police departments, but doesn't MetroLink have its own sort of semi-security force or forces?
Yeah, they employ, I think it's 37 public safety officers, and then they contract with 120 security guards. But in the story, we wrote that since 2015, none of them have had the legal authority to even issue tickets for not having a fare. So the issue of turnstiles always comes up, people riding for free. Their officers cannot write a ticket. It has to be a police officer who's deputized and everything like that. So that's a big reason there's been hardly any such tickets written either.
Is this a situation where you'd have to go back to the legislature to say, if you're one of the municipalities where MetroLink operates, we want to go ahead and have the right to be able to hire our own police force, as it were, and they would have required to have a certain amount of training, and in exchange for that, they would have the ability to write tickets and arrest people?
Well, I don't think the municipalities themselves would have to do that. They could, as far as I know, if Metro wanted to do that, it'd be a pretty big, I think it'd be a pretty substantial undertaking for them to do that, because they are classified also as an interstate compact. So there are some layers, and I don't know exactly what the process would be for that if Metro did want to. In the past, John Nations, who's the head of Metro, has looked into even getting the public safety officers classified as railroad police. And I mean, he's taken some steps to try to get that, but nothing has ever panned out.
My wife and I were having a conversation, and I said, if you think about it, and you touched on it briefly, the coding issue, that if you think about it, let's just say you're a police officer and you're called to a MetroLink stop, and then you have to decide, okay, do I use the street address of the station? Do I use the car, the train, the actual vehicle that this violation took place, or if is it broken down to where it actually took place on the platform, or is it a break-in in a car in the parking lot? How does the whole thing coded? And apparently there's no clear system anywhere in MetroLink to allow for this, right?
Yeah, it oftentimes it really does depend on the officer and where exactly it happened and all that. Yeah, it's it's messy.
Did you get the feeling that MetroLink was just trying to dodge the whole thing when you were trying to pull this, or it was just that there's just this data, and we'll give you what we got, but it's hodgepodge at best, and you're going to have to be the ones who you guys are going to have to pull it together in some kind of a form and fashion that you can use for a story.
Metro Transit wouldn't give us anything. We don't even know what they have. They do have incident reports. We know that, but the reason they wouldn't give them to us, they wouldn't, just say, look, we don't have to give these to you, but we're going to. They said that information isn't complete, it's misleading, that's why we're not releasing it.
Doesn't have anything to do with the fact that they're operating as a compact, and therefore there might be some other underlying reason there, eh?
Well, I wish we knew.
Yeah, okay.
We wanted to see what was there, and we couldn't even see what was there, which is why we had to go to the city and the county. And we know that Metro is looking at these numbers. They do weekly trend analyses, and they are looking at it. They do have some information available. It's just not open to the public because it frankly doesn't have to be.
Makes you wonder if this is more of a cost issue than anything else, because if there was enough groundswell to say, okay, let's set this up, change the rules so that Metro can hire their own force, and those men and women would have arrest powers and so on and so forth. But in exchange, they'd have to have a certain degree of training, and the overall cost to MetroLink, what that would be.
Yeah, I don't know. But, I mean, it is important to keep in mind that this is Metro Transit's budget is $309 million a year, the bulk of which St. Louis County taxpayers fund. So, I mean, when you're talking tax money, I think there should be a strong degree of transparency there.
Did you talk to passengers who frequent the train on a regular basis, or trains, and what their reactions were?
We had another reporter out. Our night reporter was out doing that, and he talked to a lot of people. We ran a whole sidebar with them, and I mean, a good chunk of them felt safe, the regular riders, but also a good chunk said we need more security on here. That was a really strong theme in everyone he talked to. And then you did have people who've had serious problems. One man who said he's ridden for 10 years and things have reached a point where he's just not going to anymore. So there is a broad range out there, and we really wanted to show that too. We didn't want to paint this as everyone who rides the MetroLink hates it, is scared of it. That's not true, and that's not everyone's experience.
I was here when the system first opened, and it was the first time I think I've ever experienced a light rail system where you didn't have turnstiles or some sort of gating to go through. You buy your ticket or your pass, and you insert it into the slot, then it activates the card, and it says, okay, you entered the system on such and such a date and time, and you have so much money on your card. I've never run into a system like this before where there's no turnstiles, there's no nothing, which means anybody can walk on a train, and it sounds like statistically your chances of being told, hey, where's your ticket? You don't have a ticket. Well, just get off the train at the next stop. It doesn't sound like there's much of that going on.
No, and that's one thing. St. Louis County Police Chief John Belmar and St. Louis City Police Sam Dotson said turnstiles should be put in at a minimum. And Chief Dotson pointed out there's a new station being built, the Cortex station on Boyle, and he raised the point: why aren't they putting turnstiles in there as a place to test it? You know, you're building it. Now would be the time to do it, and they aren't there. And Metro has always said in the past that to retrofit and even to have to rebuild some of their stations, the cost would be $100 million.
Now, Steve Stenger of the county says he doesn't quite buy those numbers.
He doesn't buy those numbers.
Yeah, and he
exactly.
he said there was a $10 million proposal submitted for turnstiles and facial recognition technology for MetroLink. And John Nations, who's obviously with the system, says, I don't ever recall seeing that before. So there seems to be a disconnect there somewhere between these two gentlemen as to what's going on. Is there, in your nosing around, is there any consideration other than that proposal from Dotson to put, I guess, a test run in the Cortex area? Is there any other proposal at this time, or is it just going to be that nasty old Post-Dispatch is coming by and aggravating us, please go away, so that we can continue operating as we've done before?
Vince Shamel, who's on the Bi-State Development, which they oversee Metro Transit, he's on the Bi-State Board of Directors, and he is going to recommend putting an extra officer, making sure at least one officer is in each MetroLink car and platform, which would double what Metro is paying now for security. The cost would be $31 million. And whether that gets traction, I don't know.
I wonder where the officers would come from, because if you talk to the chief of police in the city of St. Louis, they're down, I forget how many officers that they're...
1,000 since 1970, yeah.
Now, a lot of that, frankly, was we were in the go-go time and money was good and crime rates were beginning to go in one direction, and a lot of the officers retired and they just weren't replaced. So, and now we're in a fiscal pinch to try and get more officers. But I wonder where the officers would come from. Would they come from the various municipalities? Because I can't see a city of St. Louis police officer riding a train, a MetroLink train to, say, Shrewsbury. It would seem that every time you go into a different jurisdiction that you'd end up having to, you'd have to work within that jurisdiction and their various departments. I'm just
Well,
guessing.
there are a lot of questions how this would work, and a recommendation with those kind of details hasn't been submitted. So that's something we're going to be obviously keeping a close watch on.
Leah, I have a sneaking suspicion that's on the plate for you and the others at the Post-Dispatch. I want to thank you for joining us this morning. We greatly appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. Have a good day.
And you as well. Leah Thorson with the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. It's a great read. Assaults, crimes on MetroLink, visible on social media. While the numbers are hard to come by, it is a little bit on the frustrating side. I would suggest that maybe we get started with just getting some turnstiles to keep people from wandering around on platforms who don't need to be there. And then maybe take it one step further than that and create their own police force, like other municipalities have done. Time will tell. And speaking of time, 9:38 right now here on the Big 550.